Guys, okay, folks. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm GE. I'm here with
GD, GD Vicarja.
Cathal Ó Murchú from the Irish Freedom Party, who stood in Louth in the general election. The general election 2020, or we could say the first general election of 2020. We'll find out if it is the first, the one and only, or there could be more. So, Cathal, talk us through. Give us for people who don't know you, which is probably a lot of people, outside of Louth and Armagh and Belfast. Tell us who you are, where you're from, how your journey into nationalism and your journey into Euroscepticism.
Well, yes, Cathal Ó Murchú is the name that I'm known as now. Originally Murphy, but Ó Murchú. I'm from Armagh originally, as you say, and live in Belfast now. I would say I've always been kind of politically interested. I would have approached a lot of the political thing from maybe what you'd say the left wing, if you like, as a lot of the other people within the national movement now would say. One of the guys, Shea, is a big fan of Che Guevara and James Connolly. They're his two heroes. But I would have maybe come at this from the left wing. And when you look back at left wing politics in the 70s, you would have heard people like Tony Benn, who I met was a big hero of mine, who was firmly in the anti-EU camp. The George Galloways and that were firmly EU against the EU, and they would have shared a platform with Nigel Farage. Well, Galloway did shared a platform with Farage. Their old slogan was left, right together, sort of thing. There were ones on the left, ones on the right, if you need to use that label of convenience. But they were both firmly against the EU. So I started investigating that. When the whole debate came up then about Brexit, that was the game changer really for me. I mean, coming from, I suppose you could say, a nationalist background, you would be I would have always been nationalist, pro-Ireland, etc. But it all crystallised in with the Brexit debate itself, and I started investigating it. And I just came to the conclusion that the argument for staying in the EU was not being made, and the argument was far stronger for leaving the EU. And so I was a big supporter of Brexit, which is it's kind of funny in Northern Ireland because the only ones that are against Brexit really are the unionist community, or for Brexit are the unionist community. Now there is I think it's about 15% of the Catholic nationalists voted for Brexit, and I would be one of that group. But never gets mentioned in the media that there were nationalists that did vote to leave it. It's always taken as accepted that all nationalists are pro-EU, which is not true. It reminds me a wee bit of the Labour voters in GB. The Labour leavers, they all kind of ended up voting for the Tories. They're obviously for Boris Johnson. So they went against their original sort of hinterland and voted for just to get Brexit done, because the Tories were making far more sense out of it. The Labour position under Corbyn, who was originally a Leaver back in the 70s as well, but he just went completely nonsensical about it. So all the Labour leavers in the north of England who all voted for Brexit, they all went Tory. So it's a wee bit like that in Northern Ireland slightly. There are some Catholics that are finding themselves agreeing totally with the Unionists on the Brexit debate. And I watch all the debates there and finding myself agreeing with the Unionists on nearly everything and totally disagreeing with what SDLP and Sinn Féin are saying. So
is there a profile that you could give us? Is there a typical profile of the nationalist leaver?
Yeah, they're quite rare, I feel like,
Okay, apart from being rare.
Yeah.
15, that's 50%. Sorry.
No, because you just find that you're... I don't know if there's a profile as such, but most people that I know, friends and family, would be solidly Remainers. Now I play in a wee session group, and I was playing tonight actually, and there's one or two of them actually voted Leave, but very, very few do. And those that voted Leave almost have to keep quiet about it, because the pervading opinion is that everybody in the sort of trad music Irish speaking background, of which I would be a fan of as well, would always solid Remainers. So you nearly have to keep quiet about it. And there's some unionist friends of mine that I have very good relations with, but you can talk freely about it there because they're completely solidly Leave, So it's a very strange situation in Northern Ireland about that. And if you are a Catholic nationalist, you do almost have to not sort of talk about it too much, And as I say, friends and family are all very much in the Remain camp, and I've fallen out with some good friends about it, unfortunately, and they just can't get past that, of that Brexit's a good thing, They sort of say Brexit is a British thing and that we have to have unity. But unity, what they're talking about, is a sort of a Sinn Féin unity, which is just making Ireland a unified province under the EU, which is totally useless. It's not what I'm coming from, but that's not where I see us going. So I mean, we were.
Why is that? Some people would say, "Oh, fantastic!" we
were unified.
There's nothing wrong with being a federal state of Europe. So what's our?
Well, we were a unified.
Just playing devil's advocate, by the way. Okay.
Yeah, I know you are, but we were a unified state under GB, under Britain, and so we went to the whole lengths of leaving Britain, or the Republic did anyway. So they wanted to get independence. So it's not just about unity. Unity is a bit of a strange, it's about independence as well. So the unity thing, and Sinn Féin are banging on about it again today. I say, well, you need to resolve the debate around the EU before you start talking about unity. And that would come, I think, if Ireland leaves the EU, which is where how I find myself getting through the IFP.
Okay. IFP being the Irish Freedom Party.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the disadvantages for the Republic of Ireland, the 26 counties, whatever you want to call it, being in the EU?
Well, now I think, and I have my leaflet, as you say, I stood in the election, I've outlined the disadvantages quite clearly in that. First and foremost, I think the mass immigration system is just out of control. Free movement of people. You're talking about a bit of my background. I studied law, and so I'm pretty clear on the legal implications of being in the EU, where there are 4 pillars of freedom. Free movement of people is one of them. So we are at the behest of the 600 million people that live in the EU can come over to Ireland tomorrow and claim rights to work and a house, etc., and benefits and all that. So there's that. So I think that's not working. That's not fit for purpose. It needs to just be a managed system of migration, due to the fact that Ireland's a very small country with a small population, and it's going to very quickly become, the people are going to become a minority in the country very soon. I think that's just the way it'll go. There's no other way. That's fact. It's heading that way.
Yeah, so I read...
Immigration is a major problem. Sorry?
I was going to say, I read recently that 90% of the people living in Dublin's Docklands are non-Irish.
Yeah, I read that myself. Yeah, so that's evidence to support what I'm saying.
And the same in the north inner city of Dublin is a majority. I think it's maybe two-thirds non-Irish. So there's whole swathes.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about like pockets of Tala in the distant suburbs. We're talking about city swathes of central Dublin.
Yeah.
Are no longer Irish. I mean, people might say, well, so what? But what would you say against the people who would say, what would you say to the people who would say, so what? Well, sure, that's only a swathe. That's only like let me say, an eighth, or if you go round the clock, the slice of the pie, that's only like two slices of pizza out of 8. If the whole pizza is central Dublin, right? And you've got like the south of the river there, down by the docks, that's one slice, and then you've got the north inner city, that's another slice. For the sake of argument, let's say it's two slices out of 8. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say that the world average of non-born populations in a country is, I think, 3%. China has 1% of non-Chinese born living in China. So
wow.
If you want to compare that, Ireland now is currently running at close to 20%, if not more. That's the official. So I think that it's just gone beyond the situation where it is manageable, and we have to say, look, hang on a minute here. Like, over the last 10 or 15 years, when you're visiting down south, as I do an awful lot, like I go around the country playing a lot of chess and stuff, and I've seen the changes. I've seen the changes quite radically over the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's just the scale, and it's just the radical change that has happened. I used to think to myself, whenever I'd be visiting, say maybe 15 years ago, you'd say, God, there must be a lot of tourists over this weekend, But the fact was that they're probably living there, I had mates that would be on maybe the Brexit camp, a couple of my nationalist mates that would be on the Brexit camp who had been quite disparaging towards a lot of the Romanian ones that were just begging, for want of a better word. And they'd be slagging them off for saying, that's great for the EU, that's great. We've got loads of beggars, we don't have enough of our own beggars, But no, it's just gone to the point where the scale of it now says so what, really. I think you have to, if you say so what, you're just not really having any interest in the indigenous culture of the country at all, and it just becomes so paradoxical or contradictory to Ireland's proud history of claiming back a form of nationality from Britain, and then they got that in the 40s, 48 I think it was, a proper republic, and then 20 years later they signed it back to the EU effectively. And I mean, De Valera himself warned against this, and we didn't listen to it. So no, I think the levels of immigration in a country like Ireland are just they're just getting a wee bit beyond what we can manage and cope with in a cohesive way. It's going to become it's going to become problematic. I think I can see issues down the line. You have to maintain a strong core of the host country, otherwise you're heading for problems. That's my view. And then you talk about lack of culture, lack of sovereignty. It's all mixed in there. But we have to preserve the core of the nation state. Otherwise, it just doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm. My sister works in. I've got a sister who lives in Kildare, in business. She's got her own business in marketing and copywriting, etc. So, what could you say to the likes of her? How would she be affected positively by Ireland coming out of the EU?
Well, Ireland is now a net contributor to it, for a start. So we're going to see and we're going to have to, as I've made clear on the leaflet as well, during the election, with Britain pulling out, Ireland will have to stump up more money for it. Now, just another big bone of contention with me is the loss of fishing rights. I mean, I think we should be out of the EU for that alone. I mean, I'm a big Irish speaker, and the areas of where all the Irish communities are on the coastal areas, Donegal, Mayo, Galway, elsewhere. A lot of them are fishing areas, and it's not me that's making this point, but ask them. I watch a lot of TG Carr. Just ask them what they think of the EU. They will say, "quote Since we joined the EU, our communities have been destroyed with that. So we're losing billions to the. I don't know who made that deal about the common fisheries policy. Some people say, oh, they sold the fish. Well, they were sold a bad deal, and it's time to just say, right, that's scrap that deal. No, if you save the money that we're losing in fish, we would be just become a different country. So I've
heard a figure of 200 billion, bandied about 200 billion euros in terms of fish stocks lost since 1973. Is that right? Would that be about right?
Yeah, I would say it's probably. It's like we've lost billions. And that never gets mentioned at all. The whole narrative is always EU is great and non-EU is just bad, and anybody that says that is a racist or is a xenophobe or wants to go back to, as Micheál Martin said, the backward notion of sovereignty, which is, I mean, again, the whole argument, all the arguments made anti-EU are just absurd, and anybody with any intelligence would say, hang on a minute here, what are you saying there is wrong, So I would say to your sister, we're going to save a lot of money if we left the EU. We'd be far better off for that point alone, never mind the loss of sovereignty, the money that we will save, the fishing rights that we'll get back, and we'll be able to just make our own laws instead of having them made by an unelected, as has been said by people, an unelected bunch of old men in Brussels, which do not have the interests of the country at heart. And I think she should take heart by the fact that there are people that are prepared to say that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because people think that the European Parliament is actually the legislative body, but it's the European Commission which is unelected, which actually initiates the legislation.
Exactly.
What exactly does the European Parliament do?
Sorry.
Does the European Parliament just make recommendations on the?
Yeah, I think it does. I think
it's more of an advisory role.
Yeah, it's a talking shop. Effectively, it has no executive role. It can debate some of it. Can debate some. It can perhaps make some recommendations, but it's a real toothless tiger. The Commission and the Council of Ministers are appointed, and there's very little that we can input into that. They make rules. I've seen going back to the fishing thing. I've seen the programs about the fishing men practically begging people and ministers in Ireland in the tea shop even. I remember the Conan was over talking to them, and he says we can't really do much about this because the EU make the decisions on this. And he was the fishermen were asking him, please give us more of a slice of the pie of our own fish. Mm-hmm. To use a similar.
Of a fish pie. I've just had some fish pie. It's a good metaphor. I mean, and he said
nothing was happening. So you do literally have to beg the EU to get to fish your own water. So that's just not on, you know.
I mean, I've heard figures bandied about of less than 10%, between 5 and 10%. The haul or the catch is about 5 or 10% of what it should be. It would be if Ireland were independent. And over the years that has come to 200 billion. So that's like over those 40. Would it be 40? 73 onwards, so it's nearly we're going on for 50 years, so 4 billion a year, you could say 4 billion a year has disappeared from.
You could solve the pensions, the housing overnight if you just took back the fish, you know?
Or think all that fish being processed, it could completely regenerate the western seaboard of Ireland. I mean, we're talking about the shift from rural Ireland towards the cities, and the cities are becoming ever more crowded, with housing crises and trolley crises in the hospitals and services and jammed up roads, while the rural areas, especially the far west, the western seaboard, is becoming emptied out, and these great our Gaeltacht areas are being diminished and emptied out. Emigration from those areas. Think what regaining.
Schools are closing, and it's continuing the drift from those areas to the cities, as you say, and no, it's just another negative point of being in the EU. You know, that drift to the city, overcrowded, and forcing people to do these big commutes to jobs instead of, and then the EU will come over and tell them how to fish and what to fish and how much they can fish. When the fishermen know through generations of doing it themselves how to do their job, they don't need some guy coming over with a clipboard telling them what they can and can't do. That's actually
to keep it sustainable. They know how to keep it sustainable because
they know what they can, what to fish. They're being told they have to throw fish back, and they have to overfish certain species and then not fish other species, and that's just nonsense. The fishermen have done it for hundreds of years, thousands. They know what they're doing, and they're told they're not allowed to do what they do. So
I mean, and this is the thing. I've been listening to a little bit of reading the Gaeltacht lately because I've been working hard on my Irish this past couple of months. Going into my August. It's clear and it's starting to. I'm just at the stage where it's starting to come together. But I mean, the one thing is you don't hear anything. These issues are debated on a radio in the Gaeltacht, which is obviously part of the RTE family.
Yeah.
And have you any opinions about that? I mean, it's just birth deaths, and a bit of diverse. A bit of like the agendas, the cultural Marxist agendas, of course, get in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, occasionally you get the odd show on as I say, on TG Car, which does talk about, there's that show Taboo, which mentions that thing about the fishing stuff gets mentioned there. But then, of course, the next week it'll do some very pro-diversity, pro-globalist story, which, I think RT is very, very much on the liberal elite agenda. To just move on to another topic. I was watching a program there last week about the refugee system and the plight facing people that are looking for refugee status here. But in all honesty, the ones that were being covered on the program didn't satisfy the definition of what would be a refugee or asylum seeker. So it just seemed to me that they were identifying Ireland as a place to come. They were coming from South Africa and places like that. So under any definition of refugee status, how do they end up in Ireland? It's supposed to be the first safe country to to cut a long story short, I think people are just coming to Ireland. They've heard it's a soft touch. There's good benefits in it, and the people are very pro. They're not going to kick up anything about it, So just come to Ireland, sort of thing, And that's going to get worse than Britain till now. So I thought, you want to help genuine refugees, of course, but you can't have a system where it's going to be open to just exploitation and abuse, where there are those coming here who are not refugees, are coming here as economic migrants, and of course the RT you mentioned will not put that out there, will not make that comment at all, that there are people that, or they mention it very, very quietly, that there are those that are abusing the system. The Taoiseach Varadkar himself did make reference that there are those that are from certain countries that aren't documented. I mentioned that.
Albania and Georgia.
Yeah, Albania and Georgia. Yeah, and there was something in the news today about there has been a bit of a tightening up in certain areas. So maybe they're listening a little bit to our message, but it's only us that's saying that, and we're not afraid to be politically incorrect because it has to be said. We're basically swimming in a, I would call it a cesspit of politically correctness. That's the new God. That's the new altar we're worshiping on. Politically correctness.
Coming back to the just to make a point about the refugees coming from safe countries, the Albanians and the Georgians. Yeah. That is a result of people power. Like we have the Uachtarard uprising there, which I was involved in the sense that I provided information. I provided government statistics. Somebody I just set up a Facebook group called Support Irish Communities Targeted for the Asylum Scam. In the wake of Gearóid Murphy's wonderful, fantastic forensic video that was picked apart the asylum scam. So if you haven't seen that, I recommend everybody get a look at that, especially if you're from a rural community in Ireland, because you could be next, your community could be next.
Well, there's one Tullamore has one there just today, I've seen.
So we're here, yeah. And
it's all done behind closed doors, and it's all done without any consultation.
Exactly. And I was just providing. I provided a link to Gearóid's video, which was based on government statistics and first-hand footage of what happened in the meetings, the game of charades that was being played to try and subterfuge, pull the wool over the local community's eyes, and do a smash and grab on them, a fait accompli. And before anybody knew what had happened, the scam was in. A hotelier was getting paid big bucks.
It's a racket.
There was a community welcome group set up, which had nothing to do with the community at all. People by NGOs, but it had the name of maybe one person from the local community. The rest were outside NGOs. And then there was a nice picture, a happy family picture at the end of it, saying, "Okay, deal done. Job. The community are happy," but the community were just catching up at the last minute. But it was the result. Go on ahead. Sorry, Cal. Yeah,
it's just media whitewash. It's just that they're trotting out that formulaic story to make everybody think this is all hunky dory, but they're really just treating the local communities with total disrespect. And I feel very sorry for those communities that are being put into that position. When it's all fait accompli behind their back, and then they find out about it and they have legitimate concerns, and then they're tarred with the racist brush again. It's just totally unfair. I feel very sorry for them.
All part of the coordination, the different government entities and government allies all coming together to, bash the community from one side, and when you just recover from that, then you get bashed from this side, bashed from the press, bashed from the NGOs, bashed from the government. There's nowhere to turn. People like us, we provided information, we provided some solidarity, and that actually helped spark off the Uachtarard resistance, which was successful. And in the wake of that, do you feel that there was pressure, and do you think there's anything to do with the timing of Varadkar's statement about cracking down on the Albanians and the Georgians, the number of Albanians and the number of Georgians?
I think there was a bit of that. He timed it to sort of come in because there's an election, and he wants to show that he's doing something about it, because he'd been doing precious little about it up to there. Mm-hmm. But I think it was a wee bit cynical, but it's very too much. It's very little, very, very late. Mm-hmm. There would need to be some radical changes of policy on that for us to try and get to the system that you can start managing. So that, if they continue going the way they're going, we are going to get to a minority state. It's going to get to that. I mean, I go to America quite a lot, and I would say to myself that the Irish themselves, the white Irish, or whatever you want to call it, the native Irish population, are going to end up a bit like white Americans very soon. Because the white Americans in America now are kind of a minority, but they're the largest minority group, but they are a minority. If I was playing a chess tournament, you can look across a big, massive arena wherever he's playing, and the whites would be a minority. You can see every other kind of race around them. It could even get worse than that. We could end up like the Aborigines. Or you want to look at the Irish language, the way it's gone, we'll end up like the language. So in a couple of 100 years, they'll actually look back and say, God, well, they're actually Irish people that lived in Ireland, because people don't know, coming in from foreign shores, don't know that we used to speak Irish in this country. So they think that we used to just speak English.
What do you think the future is for the Irish language? I mean, this is something that interests me now that I've grabbed the bull by the horns and I'm working hard on my Irish every day. Tommy Fulham, obviously,
Again, I think that the strange irony is that Irish language is stronger in Northern Ireland than it is down south. So I think there's a real paradox there, that there is this more sense of Irishness in the north than there is in the south. We've always been. I personally was always very interested in learning it at school. I always found it a great fascination whenever you come down and visit in summer holidays and you'd see the up in the street signs. I always wanted to visit. I always wanted to learn it. Or down south, there didn't seem to be that. It was more of a resistance or a resentment towards the language, which I never got in the north. But so and then obviously with the political situation, maybe it took with the Republican prisoners thing, they got hold of it. But it's always been quite strong coming back in the north. But it's coming back in certain areas down south. But the future of it, at the minute, it's just been paid lip service to. But I mean, there are some encouraging signs to it. But the funny thing is, there is an irony, as I say. In the north, you have a situation where the dominant culture kind of is traditionally unionism, and it's been pushed out of the way, being replaced by what the unionists think of the greening of Northern Ireland. But the opposite's happening down south. Well, it's the same thing, but it's turned around the other way, in that the Irishness has been pushed out of down south, similar to the unionism being pushed out of the north. So it's quite I say it's a sort of a two sides of the same coin reversed. It's strange, But you could argue that it's a similar agenda. Both dominant cultures are being pushed out of the way by the sort of globalists, and in the north, the Irish language is maybe part of the globalist thing. So it's quite an unusual setup. If that makes any sense,
I sort of see what you're saying. So taking us back to the present day or the recent past, what did you make of the election? And how do you think the nationalist parties fared?
Well, I put a thing up on Facebook yesterday about something.
Maybe just tell the listeners how you did, or how you did, and how the other nationalists.
The leaf that I don't know if you can see it or not. I stood in Louth, which was a great honour to stand in. I met some absolutely fabulous people there, and we're going to now get involved, moving it forward. Now we're now starting up a common in Drogheda, and there's one in Dundalk as well. But I'm involved with the one in Drogheda, and we're going to meet up in a couple of weeks and just plan how we're going to take things forward from post-election. But the election itself, I think personally in Louth we did quite well out of the 11 candidates that the IFP had. On the overall vote, my vote in Louth was the second best of the party, second only to Ben Gilroy, I think, who had slightly more votes, but he was a big name. I was a complete unknown coming into Louth, and I ended up with 1,123, I think it was, votes on transfers. So to me, there is actually a big potential, because that equates to about 1,500 votes when you factor in.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about this the other day. Yeah, and didn't believe you at first. Yeah,
because it doesn't transfer as a full vote, so that actually equates to about 1,500 people who were fairly favourable towards our message.
So the 1,500 includes the first preference.
Well, there's the 500. I got 574 first preference, which was quite good. It was about the fourth of the party, and it equated to. You could add on then about 800 or so transfer votes, which equates probably to about 1,000 when it's factored down.
When it's factored backwards, when you work back from that, yeah.
So,
because they get factored down when they're added. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Which is what I didn't understand. Thanks for pointing that out to me.
Transfers at about 3/4 of a vote, and it goes down. So I would say there's about 1,500 people there were very favourable towards what we were saying. So that could if we could, get them to all vote as first preference next time, and add a few more by getting ourselves out and known and the awareness more. I think there's at least 2,000, maybe more votes the next time, or maybe more. If we could get our heads together, maybe with Renew or work with something there would be even more. And unfortunately, if they keep pushing the globalist agenda, I think people will eventually sort of wake up. But I put a thing on Facebook there, and one guy was saying, a YouTube thing, said that he thought that we didn't do all that well across the country. I thought it was very encouraging, really. I thought, we have to be realistic. I didn't think any of us were going to get elected, really. I thought it was just about getting awareness out there. Obviously, we wanted to do really well. It would have been fantastic, but I have to say, I didn't honestly think anybody was going to get elected. Maybe the next time, but I thought it was actually a job done. We achieved what we set out to do. We got awareness out there, and people are now fully aware that there are nationalist, stroke populist, whatever you want to call it, parties running in the country.
How many would you say? How many houses do you think you could round, or how many of? Okay, let's say, what is the electorate in Louth? About 100,000.
I think it's 120,000 or something like that.
Massive, yeah.
Well, we got the.
How many of that 120,000 do you think you? Well, I should say we, because obviously I was part of your team.
Well, we got you were Conor, you were very good help with it. Of course.
There's the brown envelope.
Yeah, you were one of a great team.
There's another brown envelope.
Yeah.
And a pint for Cathal as well, please. Yeah.
Launched it. How many did we get round? Well, there was the mail out of the leaflet that went round every house. So when it went out, which was about sort of halfway through the final week, about the Wednesday of the final week, I think it was delivered, and we were canvassing after that. I got the feedback then that everybody had seen that, and it did start to say that before that, when we were canvassing, people hadn't got a clue who we were. So yes, most people would have seen that leaflet, but were they really aware? I don't know. Face to face, we probably got around a very small percentage, really. But it's about moving forward with that now, and I think they are aware now. And the next time there'll be more and more. We've got some great ideas and plans of how we're going to move forward with that. But I think it's going to be. Well, I think we're going to rise, and if you want to compare it to that. Somebody mentioned there was comparisons made to a party in Sweden, populist party that started off with a base very similar to us, and they've now rose exponentially. So they're now, I think, one of the governing parties. UKIP, when they started, were very small. Sinn Féin, when they started, were very small.
That's right. 0.5% in the first vote. Yeah.
How much was it?
0.5% nationwide in their first vote. The first election they contested in the 26 counties was 0.5%.
That's right, yeah. I mean, I think I got 0.87% in Louth, which, it's just under 1%. I think Ben Gearóid got 1%, and one or two of the other ones got Jen O'Doherty got a wee bit more, and yeah, but I think it was very encouraging, and I think there's great potential there. It's quite exciting now moving forward. So I think we are going to move up. All we need to do is to just keep that going.
What needs to happen next, in your assessment?
We just need to get talking to more and more people. The simple doing things like this is very good. As an old brown envelope for you there. No, we have plans to get out.
Oh, that's one of the ones that I give you. You hand it back to me now. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
We have plans now to target fishing community in Louth. We're just going to get out talking to more and more people. We have a follow-up leaflet, post-election leaflet being developed. We're going to get out there and just talk to as many people as possible to let them know, to thank people for voting for us and supporting us, but to say that we are here and we're ready. We're going to be ready to hit the ground running. That was another thing that we got caught out with as well. A small party that hadn't stood before. We were given, three and a half weeks election campaign. That really boiled down to about 2 weeks by the time we got everything organised and the registration and everything and got the posters and the leaflets ready. It really only was 2 weeks in total. So I think what needs to happen is to just literally get out there and talk to people and do on the ground activism. That's what we need to do. And that's what we've got big plans to do that in Louth.
That's what's going to reach the. We were talking online there about the 99%, reaching the 99%, because our vote picked up we are the 1%. Our vote picked up the 1%, but it's reaching the other 99%. And we both agree it's not going to happen by posting things on YouTube. It's not going to happen by posting things in a group in Facebook that we're posting to people who already think the same thing, think the same way. That they're all one of us. And this is where people need to realize that the way to reach the 99%, and there was literally 99% as you were going around that hadn't heard of us. The best way is to go face to face. And plus you find out how your message is going down, don't you? You know, you can. It gives you that feedback to know if you need to refine the message or not, or how well it's been received.
Yeah, I actually have to say as well, I was pleasantly surprised at how good the feedback was, and the vote, I think, reflected that. I kind of thought that it might have been just people would have paid a bit of lip service and said dead on, but there's so many people actually were completely on message with what we were saying, and there were so many people in Dundalk and Drogheda that were actually saying that yes, we should look at getting out of the EU, you know. Mm-hmm. So I was quite surprised at how positive they were, you know. So I think we're going to be pushing on an open door with this message coming through, because I think, you know, that YouTube video that I've mentioned there a couple of times, the guy was saying that Ireland just seems to be an exception to Europe in terms of the people there are just dumbed down. They're just not dumbed down, but they're kind of anesthetized against this. They're sort of saying what you would say, well, so what if there's the EU immigration or whatever, but and in other words, he was saying that
who was it? Who was the commentator?
I forget the name of the guy. He's got this wee cartoon character thing. It's on my Facebook. I forget the name of the guy.
Is it Computing Forever? No.
Maybe.
The guy with the red hair. The guy with the red hair.
Yeah.
Dave Cullen.
Is that him that did that? I don't know if it was Dave Cullen.
Dave Cullen.
Might have been him.
The computer. He's got the with red hair, did you say?
I think reddish hair, yeah. I think it might have been him.
Yeah.
I kind of said that it was his assessment was negative in the way that it was almost accepting that Irish people just seemed to be very compliant and passive and accepting of the situation. In contrast to most countries in Europe, particularly Britain, who stood up. And Ireland's lost its backbone, really. You know, it doesn't have a backbone anymore.
I think that's not fair, really, because most people haven't had the argument made to them.
Yeah, that's what he was saying.
No, you can slag them off. You can slag them off if they've had the argument made to them, and they still they know that they're going to be possibly calumniated a little bit or smeared in the press. The likes of the Irish Times or the Sunday Business Post, etc., or two that I can think of that, for example, smeared me as far right for basically doing no more than passing government statistics to the people of Ulster and various other communities, which I think is totally unfair and totally political reporting and activists in the role of journalists, if ever I've seen it. But yeah, if you think about taking it back to the numbers. We talked about 120,000 voters in the Louth constituency, and there's no way that you could have got round more than 10% of those with the small team and the short period of time that we had. We basically improvised the team from scratch because there wasn't a common, there was no existing common in Louth. So I mean, we did amazingly well, and we might have maybe got to 5 or 10% of the households, or 5% to 10% of the voters, and to come away with like almost 1% of the vote. That we're talking about 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 of the people that we did actually talk to voted for you, Cathal. So if we can, to me it seems that all we need to do is make sure that we get round all of those 120,000, and if we can replicate that figure of 1 in 5 or 1 in 10, we're talking about 10% to 20% of the vote, which is that's definitely going to get you a TD, maybe even a good surplus there that you could be talking about. You could be building for 2 in the future. But the big question is, how are we going to get around all the houses?
Well, we just have to try and build a team. You know, we have a good, strong nucleus of a team in Drogheda and Dundalk. It's just about building that. We're just trying to get as many numbers to come to the first common meeting, which is going to be coming in a couple of weeks, starting in a couple of weeks. It's just about getting the numbers to do that. We have a strong sort of nucleus there of about maybe 10 people, but we just need to grow that. And I think we can do that. I think it's achievable. And get out to those people that are listening and will listen. And the argument hasn't been really made. I would agree with that. I would sort of disagree that the Irish are just. I think people are just the same no matter what country they're in. I mean, especially with Ireland's history of as I say, of fighting for independence. I think if they get that message said to them, I think they'll be quite receptive to it. And it's if things get worse, I hope they don't get worse. But he made the point as well that it's going to take things to get really, really to learn the lessons from Britain. They're not learning the lessons from Britain, and God forbid that there's any kind of terrorism starts big time in Ireland. I hope that doesn't come to that. We don't want things to get to a stage like that where people finally do listen. Let's learn the lessons from some other countries like Britain and Germany and Sweden, where we've seen that and do that. And this is what we're saying.
Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is for people who have a leadership role in the movement, in the nationalist movement, or the Eurosceptic movement, or the let's call it nationalist, because there's a spectrum of Euroscepticism, from soft Euroscepticism in the National Party and Renew, for example, and we in the Irish Freedom Party are harder Eurosceptics. How important is it to have for a commentator, whether a leader, a person with a leadership role, whether it's a party leader, a candidate, a YouTuber, a commentator, to have that face-to-face doorstep experience with dealing with the public, talking to the public?
Well, it is important. Yeah, I think we do have that. It's just a matter of getting the media to engage with us more.
Mm-hmm.
They're not.
Do you think many of the YouTubers have ever canvassed or spoken to gone out with a canvassing team and spoken?
No, they probably haven't. No.
Yeah, I would. I think that's. Well, do you think that would be a missing? I mean, are they qualified? Are they qualified to talk with any sort of degree of credibility about what the people think, or how messages are going down if they haven't gone onto a doorstep and spoken to a member of the public?
Well, I think they're doing a good job. They are reflecting the message that is there. I mean, so there's a role for that, but there's also a role for us getting out and being active on the ground. So whether they do that or not is something we'll have to look at. Mm-hmm. But they're fulfilling a function in doing the YouTube stuff, and that's helping get our message out there. But whether they do it or not, we're still going to go ahead with it. It's just all out there. It has to be done. It has to be tapped into.
Yeah.
We are showing leadership in doing this. We're being encouraged by the leadership of the party in starting off local commons. So it's all there. It's all been given the green light to go ahead, and we're certainly enthusiastic about doing it. So it's all to the good.
I'd say, would you say there are lessons for other constituencies where the Irish Freedom Party are organising or have organised in the past that could be learned from Louth, or possibly even constituencies where we haven't organised yet, in terms of how we managed to improvise a campaign from zero?
Lessons learned, yeah. I mean, I suppose you could perhaps target areas where you feel that there would be a more of a receptive audience. Maybe areas that have been affected badly by EU policy would be one. I mean, I think it was quite a good one because it's quite urban in areas, and there's a fishing community there, so it's actually a good constituency for us. Maybe there would be some that wouldn't be so good. I mean, if you wanted to maybe look at targeting an area where there are direct provision centres, like maybe Offaly would be one. I'm not sure if we had anybody in Offaly. I don't think we did.
No, we didn't.
Maybe be more targeted in that approach would be something to look at. and maybe try and get agreed nationalist candidates. But I think down the line the party's looking at perhaps standing more than one candidate in certain areas if they felt that there was enough of a vote. But I don't think that should be at the behest maybe of leaving constituencies without a candidate. I think we would need to have counties or constituencies where there is a candidate, at least there is one in one, before we start to look at having two in another. But that's down the line. We don't know when this next election is going to come. It might come, but then again, it might not come. So I really don't know what way. Nobody knows what way it's going to come. I don't know if it's a good thing for us if Sinn Féin went in the government or if they didn't. A lot of people are suggesting that if they went in the government, obviously there's not going to be that much change. Really, it's going to be more of the same. In fact, some are saying it's probably going to be. I think was it Michael Leahy's interview said he thinks it will be worse. It'll be even more globalist, even more pro-EU. So if it was worse with them coming in, would that maybe be an advantage to us for the next time or not? So it's hard to know. If they didn't go into government, Sinn Féin are going to play the victim, and it might give them more votes. Whereas if they did go into government, it might be better for us because we could say
they will have sorry.
So that's one way of looking at it. So at the minute, nobody really knows what way it's going to be. So there could be an election, but I think we'll be ready if there was. But then again, there may not be. It could be another 3-4 years. I think the next elections may be the ones in the Assembly ones in the north. Were you spinning yourself?
Yep.
Fellow candidate.
Okay. I was indeed, yes, and I think they're due by May 2022. So we're building. We're gonna.
How do you think that would go yourself? In the north?
It's hard to know. I mean, it's hard to know. I haven't done any more work on the constituency or Ulster, in fact, since Westminster, because it was since the Westminster election. The next thing we were straight into the speculation about whether it was going to be on the back of the Westminster, the poor results for the DUP and Sinn Féin, or the pressure that they felt whether there was going to be another assembly election, but they managed to avert that. Well, look at I think wisely they managed to avert that by going back into getting the assembly up and running again, and then hot on the heels of that we had the 26 county general election, so we haven't really had time to take a breath. Now it was just I've been flat out on politics for the last 3 months, really, since my feet touched the ground at Dublin Airport. So it's only really now we're starting to put things together, and we can start to come out with a more medium term and long term strategies. I think because there is a possibility if the 26 counties go into the polls again, we have to run with that. We have to try and be ready for that, and then if that doesn't happen, or if a government gets formed, then we can turn our attentions to the 6 counties again and start building up there, because it looks relatively stable at the moment, and we have until 2022. But I mean, as we've learned, there are a lot of houses in each of these constituencies, and you can't cover them all in 3 weeks. So you got to start. You start early. You start a year out. As soon as you can, basically getting around and letting people know that we exist, because that's the biggest issue for a new party like ourselves is just ignorance. Yeah. People don't know that we exist and don't know what we represent. They might have heard the name, but they don't really know what we represent.
But what was interesting just in the election there, I think our vote base is going to come from the Sinn Féin vote. I think it was quite clear from the transfers that I was getting. It was not all Sinn Féin voters were transferring, because some of the younger ones would be more liberal, pro-globalist, feminist, etc., etc. They're not going to vote for us.
No.
The older ones, the older, more nationalist type, will definitely consider
real nationalists. Yes.
Yeah. They were the ones that would have been nationalist, and are not, haven't completely come away from Sinn Féin, but like what our green message, if you like, not green, green as a nationalist. But I didn't get any transfers at all from the Greens, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. I could see that not one of them was Labour. They were not transferred. But so the area is maybe your Sinn Féin vote. They seem to have cornered the market, you see, in the anti-establishment populist. But it's getting the message out there that quite, if you like, they are kind of left-wing populist. People are saying in the media that election was like Ireland's Brexit. I don't agree with that.
If they do get in, I mean, if they do get in, as you said earlier, it could be good for us if they do get in, because the country needs to go through a phase of left-wing populism, and then try that out, wear that out, because it'll wear thin very quickly. We've seen that already in Greece with Syriza. We've seen that with Five Star in Italy. There's a precedence. This is you can read the signs of the times if you follow, what's really happening in Europe. I mean, if you throw away your Irish Times and throw away your Guardian newspapers and get behind the scenes and get to real sources of the really what's going on. You see that there is a precedent that after the left-wing populism, then the right-wing populism or the national populist comes in. So it could be a good thing if Sinn Féin. We should be all. Let's all become cheerleaders for Sinn Féin for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it'll be That's all said. That could be them. We can come to the electors and then say, look, there's the evidence of what's happened. They've been in government and look what's happened. They haven't done. It's not worked out. So we could then say, look, we would do that differently. Whereas if they haven't been tried and tested, it's a harder argument to make in a way. So maybe we're going to have to go through that. Swallow that pill to get our message,
And you can see that sort of happening with the existing parties. I mean, I don't know if it's election year or not, but Fine Gael have sat back and said, "Oh, we're going to be in opposition. You go on ahead."
They're doing that. Yeah.
Go on.
It's a smart move.
It's a bit of a poison chalice, isn't it? Because there are a few curveballs coming down the pitch.
It's a poison chalice, but it's also a bitter pill,
Poison chalice and a bitter pill at the same time. All right. On that light roll, on that light note, maybe we should wrap it up. What do you think? Or is there anything else you'd like to add? Final thoughts, final points.
I think that we are going to be battling on that thing about the left-wing populism sort of thing. That's where we might where we're going to get votes from, but. Just I was going to mention that the whole debate about, where we find it difficult is that everybody says, well, the Irish emigrated and they did this and why you have to hold the hand out for it. But that's a different type of emigration at all. And that will, we'll have to bring Kedmi the Fulcha and all that. But Ireland has given far more per capita to countries from all around the world than any other country. I think we've done more than our fair share of that. And I think it's time that we just sort of prioritise ourselves a little bit in our own country, because it's the only country that we have, and if it goes, where do we go? Where do we go then? Are we going to go to Greenland or somewhere? I mean, that's no. We have to hold on to our own homeland here, and that's the important thing. So that would be the note that I would like to finish on.
Put Irish interests first.
Exactly. I think that's what it says on the tin.
Putting Irish interests first. Very good call. Well, listen, go to me in the market, and I'll talk to you soon. And people, please, I'm new at this, but I'm going to say it because I've actually just remembered to say it. So let's do it. Please like. What did you say? Like, subscribe, and share. Is that right?
You know more than me about it.
Well, whatever the other guys say, just do the same thing, please. Yeah, and see you in the next one. Right, Carl. Thanks a million.
Slán go fóill.